Thank you so much, Chelsea and Sam. I'm very much in awe of God when I hear them performing, because we really wanted to have a real music ministry, but we really had no idea of how we were going to actually make that happen. And we tried different things and tried reaching out to different people that we knew. And somehow along the process, Chelsea and her family started coming here, and Sam came here to be blessed with Johanna, and it was all things that were kind of out of our hands, but I just feel so grateful whenever they're performing, because I just feel, something special when they are singing, and I really, really appreciate it so much. You guys have no idea. You have no idea how, maybe you do, actually, when you have like an idea for something or a vision for something, but you have no idea how you're actually going to make that happen in your life, and somehow God pulls through for you. And you feel like you didn't even do anything, or you didn't feel like you made the right decisions, or you did the right thing. So anyway, that's really great. So if you've been coming to service for a while, we're in the middle of a series called the School of Love series. And this is a series on practical and spiritual guidance on deepening our most important relationships. And every week I come up here and I say, if you missed last week's message, you should go back and listen to it. And I'm going to say it again because last week's message was really great. I wasn't here, but I listened to the recording a couple times. Andrew Love gave a great message. And I really am grateful for Andrew, because him and his family have gone through so much to be able to get to where they're at. He just barely scratched the surface of their experiences. There's so much that he could talk about, and that's only what I know. I'm sure that in their experience, there's so much more. So I'm really grateful for his honest sharing and talking about the husband-wife relationship last week. And there's been some really great messages so far on the heart of parents and God's heart and husband-wife relationship. And we're moving on today to sibling relationships, brothers and sister relationships. Just like all the other relationships that were talked about so far, these relationships are the foundation by which we learn to relate to all the other people in the world. How we learn to relate with our parents is how we relate with older people, or bosses, or parental figures in our life. How we learn to relate to our sisters or our brothers is how we learn to relate with other people, men and women in the world. How we learn to relate as parents to our children or grandchildren or grandparents or whatever is all connected to how we learn to relate with all the other people that we meet in our lives who stand in those positions. I had an interesting experience yesterday. There was some kids playing basketball, and they were in our parking lot, and they were being kind of rough with our basketball hoop, hanging on it, and like 3 kids hanging on it at the same time, and I was like, "Hey guys, you're gonna break it if you do that." And they gave me some attitude, and they were like, "Thanks, Daddy." I was like, and I wasn't in a good mood. I was like, okay, not being unreasonable here. But I could tell that I was going to say something really, abrasive if things kept going. So I just kind of let it go, and I brought my groceries in or whatever. But, there's some rough kids in this area, and I know that a number of them come from difficult family situations where maybe they don't have a dad, or maybe their dad is not a good dad, abusive, or whatever. And so it's unrealistic for me to expect them to treat me with respect and in a nice way, just because I'm trying to talk to them nicely, I realize. So I could kind of let it go a little bit, but it was just kind of one little experience. The important thing about this series is that we're talking about how to learn to love and relate and understand people that are different than us. We don't need to learn how to relate to people who are the same as we are. That's an easy thing to do. But learning how to love and understand and relate to people who are different than us is a challenge. So I found a really neat quote that I think kind of summarizes this series, and I wanted to share it with you. It's from our founder, Reverend Moon. He said, "What is the system of the ideal world? It is an extension of the family system. If you have perfected your heart in accordance with the principles, in accord with the principles of the family textbook, wherever you go, you will treat the people of any family as your brothers and sisters, or your sons and daughters. When you meet someone as old as your grandparents, you will treat that person as your own grandparent. When you meet people the same age as your sons and daughters, you will treat them as your children. When you encounter children the same age as your own children, you will naturally share your food with them. We must create such a world. Unless we live for the sake of others, we cannot bring about a world of peace." Whoops. If we do not develop the philosophy of living for the sake of others from a concept into a living reality, this world cannot become a world of peace. So, going to God's Word, we see a lot of sibling relationships in the Bible. It's actually a very vital and important part of the Old Testament, where God was trying to establish a foundation for Jesus to come. After Jesus, in the New Testament, it's also pretty important, but we don't see a lot of this kind of family level restoration or providence happening. It's much more on the ideological level or on the world level between nations and ideologies and thoughts. But we still see that the peer relationship is very important. Making unity within our communities, our church, our society, and with our own families is vital. And it's just kind of like what Andrew was sharing last week. He said, we can talk about large things like North and South Korea and bringing, unity in the world and uniting, Cain type and Abel type ideologies. But we can't forget about, or we can't deprioritize our own personal relationships in our families. No matter what level God is working on in the world, this part is always important. I've got another quote here. "Your parents' wish for you is to love your brothers and sisters more than you would your own parents. That same is true for God. God, as the parent, would want you to love your brothers and sisters more than even you love him." And this is from Matthew 18. "Again, truly I tell you that if two of you on earth agree about anything they ask for, it will be done for them by my Father in heaven. For where 2 or 3 gather in my name, there I am with them." What Jesus said. So in our church, we call these relationships Cain-Abel relationships. So whether we're talking about central figures in the Bible or our families today, we see in the Bible Cain and Abel, of course, kind of where the terminology comes from. But also many other siblings were very important in the Old Testament. Jacob and Esau, Isaac and Ishmael. Isaac was Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob being the root of Christianity, and Ishmael being the root of Islam. Joseph and his 11 brothers, Noah's 3 sons, and then even Jesus and John the Baptist, even though they weren't brothers, but were related. That Bible actually tells us that Jesus and John the Baptist were cousins. And they were very close in age. John was actually just about 6 months older than Jesus. And the divine principle teaches us that John's inability to be able to support and uplift Jesus in front of the Jews was the key reason why Jesus had to go to the cross and had to determine to come back again for a second coming. This is from something our founder. Yeah. Cain and Abel must become one. John the Baptist in the older brother position could not become one with Jesus in the younger brother's position. And so we saw that in the Bible that when these brothers or people in the position of Cain and Abel could unite and could reconcile and could forgive each other and could love each other, then God's providence and God's will could take a step forward. When they couldn't unite, when they couldn't reconcile, when they couldn't get over judgment and jealousy and anger, then God's providence took a step backward. And God had to start anew in some way, or had to restart in some way. So in terms of God's providence and history, unity among siblings is very important, as well as our ability to digest and create reconciliation with people who aren't necessarily even part of our family, but are different from us. Growing up, I just have one sister, but I have 4 children, and I can tell you that, especially as a pastor and having many experiences with many people for my age, I think, there's no denying the reality that people are just different. There are many, many different kinds of people. My children are very different from each other, although the twins are pretty similar. But all the rest are different. Me and my sister, growing up, I felt like we were complete opposites. I don't know if that's really true, or if that's just the way you feel when you're with your siblings. I felt like we could never get along. I felt like we could never do things together. Even we tried to play board games together, and she would just walk away and be like, "Oh, I'm bored with this." But I could play board games like with myself for hours, even longer. I had a Monopoly game going with 8 players, but I was the only actual real person. And I just had it on my floor in my bedroom. I go back to it every once in a while. I think it was there for months, and eventually I think I stepped on it or something, and I was like, okay, forget it. But when I was younger, I loved board games. I don't really play so much anymore, but I tried to get my sister to play with me, but she just didn't have the patience or interest in it. I was very much like I could do things by myself for long, long periods of time, play on the computer, play basketball by myself or whatever. She was very different. I think much more of like a relational person. But when we were young, it was really hard for me to appreciate our differences. But as I get older and I realize how different I am from pretty much everybody that's important in my life, I realize it's really valuable to really appreciate the differences. You're never going to be able to find anyone exactly like you. You may think you have some similarities, but when you dig really deep, you realize, oh, we really differ in this way or that way. And the closer you're connected with each other or depend on each other, the more important those things become. We often fall into the trap in relationships where we expect that other people should value and appreciate the same things and be inspired by the same things that I am, or that I am inspired by, or that I appreciate. This is really an arrogant way of thinking. When Adonia and we did the marriage course, or if you do any kind of like seminar or like marriage support, oftentimes you will learn about the love languages. And the love languages talks about how each person, there's different ways that people receive and give love. Typically the same thing. Like, I really appreciate physical touch, and so I like to give affection with physical touch. Whereas my wife really appreciates words of affirmation, and she really likes to give words of affirmation. And because although I appreciate words of affirmation, and although she appreciates physical affection, we have very different love languages. So if I seek to receive love from her the way I want love to be received, without thinking that she may feel love differently than I do, then we're going to have a lot of problems in our marriage, in our relationship, because we're different. And I have to learn to be able to give love in a way that she's able to receive. And she has to learn how to give love in a way that I'm able to receive. As a couple, we can get stuck feeling that my husband or wife doesn't appreciate me or love me the way I want to be loved. Or maybe I'm trying to love my children, like what Kendra's talking about, but they aren't responding, or they don't really feel like, and we could feel as parents like, oh, I work so hard for you. I provide, I clean, I try to, do the things that I think you need or appreciate. But sometimes that's not the kind of love that they respond to or that they're actually looking for. Sometimes we can isolate ourselves from people because it can be really hard to be able to give love in a way that I actually don't understand or feel myself. And even with spirituality, there's different ways that we feel inspiration. There's different ways that we feel connected to God. Not everybody's the same. There are people who feel more connected to God through, like church, coming and sitting down, listening to a message, singing songs. There's some people who feel more connected to God by going on a hike than they do by coming to church. There's some people who feel more connected to God by singing or listening to music than they do by listening to a message. There are some people who feel more connected to God by opening God's Word and reading it in the silence of the quiet of the day. And we can get kind of caught up in thinking that there's one way that we need to experience God. But I think that's part of the reason why we've been really trying to create more of a balanced service experience. It's not so easy to maybe get out in nature with church, although like if we were in California or something, that might be possible in the wintertime. But trying to create a balance of, relatable messages, having fellowship together after service in the lunch, having good music. We try to fill as many of the different ways that people can receive God and feel God as possible, even though it's not, always an easy thing to do. But the point is that we're different. And even from a non-providence or restoration or biblical point of view, we have to acknowledge that God is a God of variety. God intentionally made a variety in creation. We look at, the mountains and the animals and the flowers and everything that God created. If God didn't care about variety, then he wouldn't have made so much variety of color, so much variety of sizes and shapes and insects, even things that we don't even see with our own eyes. Even the universe with all the stars and the planets that we don't actually see close up, but God put so much effort and care and love to build a world that we could appreciate and that we could feel loved by. And I think that says something about God, says something about us, that we need to really learn to appreciate variety. We need to really learn to appreciate differences. Ideally, so there are many, many kinds of people in this world. Just like there's an incredible variety in nature. We have people who are very intellectual, and we have people who are very artistic. We have people who are very introverted, and we have people who are very extroverted. And it goes on and on and on. Ideally, this appreciation for a variety of people is something that we learn in the family. But we don't all have big families. We don't all have functional or healthy families, so we don't always have that experience. But when it comes to our relationships in our family, marriage and parenting and relationships in general, it's about learning. It's not about learning how to relate with people who are just like me, or to find people or things that work for me in my life the way I am. It's about learning how to reach people where they're at. It's about learning how to relate to people who are different than me. Here's another quote from our founder. If you can love others as though you would your own brother and sisters, other parents as though you would your own parents, other grandparents as though you would your own grandparents, then you can love God. If we think that my way is best, and that I only want to be people that I can relate with, then we end up living a very narrow life. And the actions and motivations of others will always be a mystery to us. Here's another quote. Think of yourself. In your mind, you have been hiding someone. I don't like that brother. Even though he is my own brother, I don't like him so much. Or, I am that close I am not that close with my own sister. If you have animosity in your heart for some person, you must go to a similar person and serve her, serve him, and try to make up. We have to learn how to live together in human relationships. How can we serve each other? Unless you can be a harmonizing, unifying family person, you will not be admitted into the kingdom of God as a good citizen. You will not be qualified. So, inevitably, we have in our life people who are very different from us. And I think to some degree it's natural that we want to be with people who are similar to us. I personally I don't think that's a problem. It's nice to spend time with people who have similar interests than me. I like talking with people who like anime and computers and renovation work and things like that. I like talking with people who are a similar age. When I went to LA, I met up with an old friend of mine. Some of you may know him, Kyle Stadelhofer. We're the same age. He's got 2 kids. And it was just really nice. It was really nice to be able to spend time with someone who's a dad, a husband, similar age, raised in the church, and all these things. But we unfortunately don't have the luxury of choosing our family. We don't have the luxury of choosing many times our coworkers and other people in our life. And we really have to learn how to understand people who are different than us. We can't just assume that because someone thinks differently or does things differently that they're a bad person, even though sometimes they can feel that way because we can get hurt by other people. But in my message today, I really hope that we can come away with the remembrance or the understanding that God has always asked his people to reconcile. God has always asked his people to unite, to bring harmony, even sometimes at the expense of our ego and our pride, to be able to humble ourselves, to be able to, just like in the story of Cain and Abel, God wanted Cain and Abel to make the offering together. That was what God wanted. That was why God refused Cain's offering. He wanted Cain and Abel to make the offering together. And they couldn't do it. So in our world today, please think about maybe someone in your life that you don't get along with, or you don't understand. Why does that person do things the way they do them? It bothers me so much. Why does that person say the things that they say? It just seems so weird. Or maybe, especially if this person is probably close to you, can be very hurtful. Please, something that we don't do enough in the world today is really listen to one another. And like having conversations. I think this is amplified by social media a little bit, where we don't take time to actually really sit down with a person, give them the time of the day, and sit down and be like, I want to know a little bit more about you. Tell me a little bit about your life. How did you come where you're at in your life today? Why do you believe the things you believe? I think you would be surprised it may open your mind to a little bit of a broader perspective and world that what we're used to. We can spend too much time with people who are like us. And I think that creates, I don't know where the line is, but when we go too far, it creates really narrow-mindedness, prejudice, us-them mentality. And, we're all guilty of it. I am too. It's more comfortable. But I would really recommend that as people who are really trying to live genuine life of faith and really trying to love God, just like the quote said, if we want to love God, we have to love God's children. And that doesn't mean just the ones who are like us. We have to remember, let me see if I can get this thing off. Those of you who have a blessing ring, 12 gates symbol. There's a symbol on the blessing ring. We don't use the symbol so much anymore. But the symbol represents the 12 gates of heaven. And 12 gates of heaven represent the 12 different major personality types. And the point of the symbol is that a person qualified to actually go to heaven loves and respects and understands all the different shades and variety of people in the world, not just the people who are like ourselves. And I think that ultimately, I don't know how closely God is watching each and every one of our lives. And, we're not necessarily, I don't know, like these central figures or like big people in the Bible. But I do believe that when we make effort in this area, we create reconciliation, we broaden our perspectives to be able to embrace a wider variety of people, then I do believe that God can actually be more present in our lives, can actually be more manifested in our relationships, and actually can do more in the endeavors that we do than if we were to keep to ourselves. So that's my message for today. Please join me in prayer. Dearest Heavenly Parent, we thank you so much for this day. I'm grateful for everyone that could come to church today and to celebrate and fellowship together, sing songs, and focus our hearts and minds on you. For the week, we know that our lives can get so busy and sometimes really unsettled. We run into challenges, we run into difficulties, we get stuck. Heavenly Parent, we know that you don't want us to stay stuck, and life is a journey of learning to love bigger and to embrace bigger and to become like you in character and heart. And I really pray that we can, take the steps forward. I hope that you could speak to us this morning through in our hearts and spirits. And just grateful for your presence in our lives. Please continue to guide our families, our lives, our community, our church, to be able to do bigger and better things. And we just really thank you, Heavenly Parent, for being the source of all of love and for creating this beautiful world and all the exciting things that we can experience in our life, Heavenly Parent. We know that you are watching us and you are close to us, even in the times where we don't feel you. And I thank you, and I offer this prayer in our names as blessed central families. Amen and adieu. Thank you.